So, welcome to this webinar, Pop Locks and Legal Talks. We're going to talk everything about car break-ins, auto theft, and liability that you guys see as landlords, as property management companies. So, we're super excited about this. Thank you for joining. A lot of great information that you're going to get, some legal advice from Melinda here. We're going to go ahead and dive on into the agenda, everything that we'll cover. We'll do some introductions at the beginning and kind of dive into Cloudastructure and Offit Kurman and what we have to offer. And then we'll talk about the scope of the problem. So we'll cover some of the data and statistics surrounding everything to do with car break-ins and vehicle theft. And then we'll dive into some of the challenges that you guys face in regards to civil litigation, criminal prosecution, negligence, and how those liabilities vary from state to state. And then we'll talk about how to proactively de-risk your parking facilities, how you can be proactive in that standpoint. And then, as I mentioned, we will dive into some questions that you guys have on the Q&A. And yes, Chris, we will have a recording, if I'm not mistaken, of this webinar that we will share afterwards for those that are unable to attend the webinar. Yes, Kathleen, we will have a recording. So we'll send that out to everyone, and then we'll also have that to share with those that weren't able to join the webinar. All right, perfect. So I'm going to hand it over to Melinda McBeth. She's joining us from Offit Kurman. Melinda, welcome. Thank you so much for your time in joining. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you for having me, Jen. I'm happy to be here again. My name is Melinda McBeth. I am an attorney with Offit Kurman. Offit Kurman is a full-service civil litigation law firm that we have offices all up and down the East Coast. We are now in the process of adding an Atlanta, Georgia office. We already have offices in Florida, Virginia, South Carolina, North Carolina, DC, Maryland, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York. And we also have one office out on the West Coast in Los Angeles. So we pretty much do every type of law, except we don't really do criminal law, although I occasionally will take a criminal case for fun. And we do not do personal injury like your car accident plaintiff litigation, but we do everything else. We have a landlord representation group, which is where I operate out of. And we've got multiple attorneys in each of our offices that represent landlords, everything from rent court to drafting leases to representing you in fair housing discrimination complaints or, lawsuits over things like car break-ins on your property. So I am excited to be here today. A lot of my knowledge is specifically tailored to Maryland because that is where I practice law. So if you are here from Cincinnati or from Indiana or from, someplace other than Maryland, then I would encourage you, if you have a specific issue, to reach out to your local counsel and get specific advice from them. Today, it's going to be a little bit more of a broad overview, but I am excited. We've done this once before, Jen, and it was a lot of fun. So I'm looking forward to some good questions again today. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Yes, absolutely. We're going to cover some great stuff. So thank you again for joining us, Melinda. And myself, my name is Jen Free. I am Director of Sales with Cloudastructure. We specialize in AI surveillance and remote guarding. A little bit about my background is that I'm from the operations side. I started off as a leasing consultant, worked my way up to property manager and regional manager. And the reason I like to share that is I have been in a lot of your guys' shoes. I've been in the position of sitting on property, dealing with some of these issues that you guys deal with on a day in, day out basis in terms of security, property damage, lease violations, resident issues, the list goes on and on. But it's why I'm so passionate about our solution, because if I would have had solutions like this back when I was working on site, it would have made my job so much easier. So I really specialize in the security aspect in regards to the property management industry. So I'm super excited to share what we have to offer you today. And yes, thank you again for joining. We're excited to have you here. So I kind of touched on Cloudastructure a little bit, but to dive into it a little bit more, we specialize in AI surveillance with remote guarding options. So as I mentioned, it's really that proactive aspect in regards to being able to stop something in action in real time, as opposed to reacting to something that has already happened. So as opposed to walking into the leasing office the next morning to find 6 of your residents' vehicles were broken into, as opposed to that, you would get an incident report from our remote guarding team saying, this is what we deterred. So as you can imagine, the time savings, the cost savings, the unhappy residents that you're saving yourself from, the list goes on, but we really specialize in those AI, artificial intelligence analytics in regards to surveillance solutions, as well as integrating that live aspect of that human intelligence in conjunction with technology to really hone in on creating the best security environment for each specific property. And we're able to customize our solutions based on each specific needs of the property. As you guys know, every property is so different. The issues that they're faced with, the kind of residents that you have on site, everything is so different. So we're able to completely customize our solution based on our expertise, as well as in combination with learning from the on-site team what specific issues, what specific areas are of concern, and everything like that. So I'm definitely going to dive into our offerings a little bit later, but that's kind of a high-level overview of what Cloudastructure has to offer. Now, I do want Melinda, give us a little bit more. I know you kind of touched on Offit Kurman a little bit, but if you could dive into what you guys do on more of a high-level aspect.
Offit Kurman is as I mentioned, a full service law firm. We operate in multiple locations throughout the United States. We help small landlords, mom and pop landlords who, may have just one rental property or two, to all the way up to large multifamily corporate landlords who operate nationally and internationally. We kind of do it all. And we're also an AmLaw 200 firm, which means that we are one of the top 200 law firms in the country as far as annual revenue goes. I think the list just came out and we were 180 something this year, 184th, I think, which is we're slowly creeping up the list. We're making progress every year. So I am excited. Offit Kurman, I will be celebrating my 4th year anniversary at Offit Kurman next month and my 15th year practicing law. So I'm excited about that. I am happy at Offit Kurman. I think it's a great group of people. And we do things like, business formation. And also we have a family law department. So if you ever have any type of family law needs, divorce, child custody, things like that, we do that. We do trust and estates, will drafting, everything you can think of. I, however, live in the realm of landlord tenant, and I am very happy there.
All right. Let's get into the nitty gritty. So, scope of the problem. We'll talk about some of the statistics here, which will knock some of your socks off. A car is broken into in the United States every 26 seconds. Just let that sink in. One car just now broken into. Over 3 million car break-ins every single year and 1 million auto thefts every single year. That is out of control. And of those numbers, 40% are occurring in multifamily communities. 26 seconds later, another vehicle broken into. So in the multifamily communities, that's everyone that we're talking to here. As you guys are well aware, you guys wouldn't be joining this webinar if this wasn't an issue for you. So you guys are well aware of these statistics and how often you guys are having to deal with residents being unhappy with their vehicles being broken into, security issues that you're having to really hone in on and face. The list goes on and on. 95% of those car break-ins go unsolved, and only 9.3% of auto thefts are solved. So as you can see, this is an ongoing issue and it's only getting worse. So in the United States, in regards to stolen cars, only 85% of them are recovered. 15% of them are not recovered. And when they are recovered, the condition of the vehicle, as you can imagine, 30 to 40% of them are damaged. So that's forced entry, vandalism, stripped for parts, mechanical damage, the list goes on and on. So these statistics are really kind of bringing to light a huge issue that is being dealt with nationwide, which is why we're having this webinar. So we're really going to dive into some ways that you can be proactive in preventing that. But also the reason we have Melinda here is that some of your guys' concerns are how to deal with it, how to handle it when something like this happens on property. So Despite billions of dollars being invested by car companies to increase car security, car theft has grown faster over the years. So I don't know if you guys are aware of the Kia challenge on TikTok. It was a TikTok trend that encouraged users to steal Kia vehicles by exploiting a manufacturing defect that was in the vehicle that allowed them to be hotwired with a USB phone charger. Wild. And so that trend happened on TikTok, which led to a boost of auto theft and juvenile crime. So 1,000% increase in thefts of targeted vehicles since that. 38% of those arrests involve juveniles, which is a really sad statistic. It's not starting their life off very well, and it's affecting their parents and their families. 277,000 vehicles stolen with this trend between 2011 and 2021, 19% increase in juvenile auto theft. So it hasn't affected the juvenile realm in a very negative way. This item right here in the center of the screen it's a product that can literally be bought on Amazon right now by the general public. And it's an item that allows people to be able to reprogram keys in less than 40 seconds. So that is definitely not helping the issue of the rise of auto theft nationwide. That's literally available to the general public at this very time. This last image here kind of shows the increase of car theft, even regardless of the increase in money, billions of dollars that is spent on car security year after year, 127% increase. So let's get into a little bit of the challenges and how to handle those challenges. So Melinda, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you now.
Sure. Obviously, when you have car break-ins on your property, some of the big issues that you're going to deal with is you're going to have damaged vehicles, right? And you're also going to have to deal with potentially stolen property. Even if they're not coming in and actually stealing the vehicle, they're breaking the windows to take out an umbrella or a quarter from the cup holder, whatever it is. When Freddie asked which state has the highest rate of vehicle break-ins, I thought it was going to be my state, Maryland, because I live in Baltimore City, and it is pretty bad here. It's definitely bad. Even if they don't steal your car, they will break your window for a quarter. And once you have a broken window, you're looking at a significant amount of money for some people to be able to get that fixed. Like Jen already mentioned, only 85% of cars are recovered, but out of that 85%, 30 to 40% of them are damaged. So that creates questions for our purposes. When a car is damaged or stolen, who pays for that? Is it the resident or the landlord? When the car isn't recovered, or if it is recovered and it's damaged, who pays for that? Is it the resident's responsibility or the landlord's responsibility? The answer, by and large, is that it's the resident's car insurance company that's going to be responsible for it. So the big question that I think everybody wants to have answered is, can a landlord be held responsible for when a tenant's car is stolen or damaged or vandalized? And the answer, like the answer to pretty much every legal question that anybody ever asks me, is maybe. But by and large, no. Landlords are not liable for the criminal bad acts of third parties, right? You don't have to gaze into a crystal ball every day and try and figure out who's thinking about committing a crime on your property and ways to stop it. So if someone comes onto your property or breaks into your parking garage and steals a car, if you had no way of knowing that that was going to happen, then you are not liable for it. But if you are on notice, if you know that these things are regularly happening in your community, if there's some sort of a security breakdown, like the gate on the parking garage is broken and anyone can just go in and out, then you may have liability. And that's when the liability starts to get triggered. The main issue is going to be foreseeability. Did you have any way that you could have predicted that this was going to happen? And I think the more frequently that it happens, the more foreseeability that you have. You may not be responsible for the first car that gets stolen out of your parking garage, but the 10th one in a week, you might be on the hook for. Because at this point, you know that it's a problem. And so you need to take steps to try and mitigate that. If it's a broken gate, you need to fix the gate. If you can't fix the gate right away because the parts are on back order from who knows where, then you maybe need to take additional measures. You put a camera out there, or you post a guard, a physical guard who's going to sit out there 24 hours a day to monitor the garage. You do have a duty to take some steps to try and stop crimes that you know are regularly occurring. But if it's just a random one-off, you are not going to be liable for that. Now, what are some of the risks with this? Obviously, resident attrition. Residents are not going to want to stay around and continue to live at your property if their car is getting stolen or broken into or damaged. I see that a lot. People trying to break their lease because somebody went and stole their car. Insurance rates are going to go up across the board. My vehicle insurance living in Baltimore City is just through the roof. It's insane. The amount of resources that you're going to spend. Obviously, if you have to post a security guard outside of your parking garage, that's going to cost you money. And if you use an employee that's already existing, already on site, then that's going to cost you resources because that person is going to be sitting in the parking garage as opposed to whatever else they're supposed to be doing. You could potentially face lawsuits for negligence due to repeat security problems. And that's not really something that you can avoid. Anybody can sue anybody for anything. That's just the way it is. People file lawsuits against Jesus and Satan on a fairly regular basis. They don't win those lawsuits, and they probably wouldn't be successful in a lawsuit against you, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to be a huge drain on your resources with legal bills and time going back and forth to court and all that kind of stuff. So even if the lawsuit isn't successful, it's still going to probably hurt you in some way or another just to have to deal with it.
Yeah, that's all great information, Melinda. I do have a couple of questions. So I see Nicole asked, what would be considered as frequent? And so after how many incidents do I need to upgrade security and over what period of time would you say? So I know it probably depends.
So that's the other answer that I give. If it's not maybe, the answer is it depends. And in this case, I think it depends. Every situation is going to be unique, right? There's going to be all kinds of different factors. If you had one last month and there's another one this month, I think you can probably get away with, there was no foreseeability there. But if it's multiple times a month or multiple times a week, then I think you do need to take some steps to try and protect your property and your residents' property. You do have a duty to ensure that where your residents are living is safe for them. The same way that you have to make sure that there's running water, there's heat, all of the things. You also have to make sure that it's a safe environment to the extent that you can control it, understanding that you're not bringing these people in to steal your residents' cars. These are people who are coming onto the property, probably not residents. They may live across town. They just see a good opportunity and they take it. There's no way for you to control what other people are going to do, especially if they're going to go commit crimes. But if you know that it's a problem, and I'm not going to put a number on it because, like I said, it's always situational. If you know that it's a problem, then you should at least be taking some steps to the extent that you can. Mitigate your damages is what we call it.
And so to kind of add on to that, obviously, if it's an issue and they need to take action, Bernadette asks, what if we don't have cameras on the property and can we be liable because of the lack of coverage?
So again, I think it comes down to, was there a foreseeability there? Do you know that there is frequent crimes occurring on the property? If you do, then I think cameras are probably a good idea. Some locations now have laws that require landlords to have cameras on their property. Prince George's County here in Maryland, for example, passed a law last year or the year before, and they just revised it again, requiring landlords who have what they call high occupancy buildings, which means 100 units or more, you are now required to have cameras on your property, with a couple exceptions. So in that case, you could be liable if, for example, your property is in Prince George's County, Maryland, and you are required to have cameras and you do not have cameras. I think that is pretty clear liability. It's also a civil fine and a violation of the law. Kathleen just reminded me, PG County's newest version of their surveillance law goes into effect on June 1st of this year, June 1st, 2025. So that's coming up pretty soon. Yes. If you have a property in PG County and you do not have cameras, call me.
Yeah. And then call me.
Yeah, that's right. And then call Jen, because there's a couple things we need to talk about.
Yes. And that is definitely something that we've noticed more nationwide. There are more and more mandates going into effect, such as that PG County surveillance law. And so if you have any questions surrounding that, definitely reach out to either of us. We can definitely help you with that. I did want to also ask, and so to kind of add on to that, if you have cameras, but they're not working at the time of the incident, Could you be held liable due to that?
Yes, you could. And again, it depends. If the cameras go down for 10 minutes and in that 10-minute window, somebody goes and crimes on your property, then I think your risk of liability there is low. But if the cameras have been down for a month and you know that they're down, then the next question is, what have you done to bring the cameras back online? If you are taking steps to actively fix the problem and there's just reasons beyond your control why it isn't fixed yet, then that is something that's going to work in your favor. But you may be obligated to figure out another way to keep your residents safe while the cameras are being repaired. Whether that's posting a guard on site or locking doors that aren't normally locked and making tenants use their keys to get in and out of the buildings. Those are all things that I would do my best to at least take steps to try and rectify the problem as quickly as you can. And always make sure that you document everything that you are doing to fix the problem. That is how cases are won and lost, is with your documentation. If you have a paper trail showing all of the efforts that you've made, then you are more likely to be successful and avoid liability. And to answer Jane's question about the camera requirement in PG County, it does not apply to commercial. It is only multifamily, and it is what they call high occupancy buildings. So communities that have at least 100 units on their property.
And I know, Melinda, you keep bringing up a solution or a way to be proactive and kind of help if you are experiencing these issues, to have an on-site guard. I know a lot of you are thinking that's really costly, that's really expensive. There's a shortage of on-site guards. They're not effective. I understand. And Cloudastructure has a solution for that that is cost effective. And it's kind of what I touched on earlier, but I'll dive into it a little bit more. But we have a lot of clients that have utilized our remote guarding solution in place of on-site guards, and they're able to save money, but also giving that extra layer of security that would be beneficial if you guys are experiencing these issues.
Yeah, I think Jen is going to give a demonstration at some point, right, about exactly what Cloudastructure does. It's very cool. I've seen it before. I think it's very neat, the way that they operate and can help deter crimes. Angela, I see your question. Can having cameras make you liable if they're not directed or covering all areas? Again, the answer is maybe. With the Prince George's County law, they have some specific specifications about where the cameras need to be, how much field of vision they need to cover, those sorts of things. The way the PG County law is structured is it's like common areas, places where non-residents have access, because that tends to be where most of the criminal activity occurs. Because 9 times out of 10, it's not your own residents that are going in and committing these crimes. It's outsiders. It's bad actors coming in from outside doing this. So if you have places that are what we call secured access, right, only your residents can get in and out with a key or key card or whatever it is, then those are usually more safe. Cameras in the hallways of the buildings is generally pretty rare. I know some landlords will put cameras in their internal hallways, but most of them do not. We're really talking about things that will show the common areas or maybe the pool area. I think the parking garages are a big one. At a minimum, I would have them at the entrance and the exit so that you can see who's coming in and going out. And then in that way, you can at least narrow down if a crime occurs on the 5th floor of the parking garage, then you can say, oh, well, 10 minutes before this happened, this car drove in, and then 10 minutes after it happened, this car drove out. It's not a slam dunk. It doesn't prove beyond a reasonable doubt, as they would say, that person is the one that did it. But I think it it points you in the right direction, I guess I should say.
Absolutely. All right. And I do have one more question, then we'll go ahead and move on. But I think this is an important one because we are talking about coverage and surveillance. So who do we let see that surveillance footage? The police, residents, everyone's going to want to see it. Are we liable to show them?
So in general, you are not. The law in PG County, Maryland, does require landlords to retain the security footage for a specific period of time, and also directs them to share any footage from any incident with law enforcement or residents or people with what they call a bona fide interest. If somebody was visiting the property, visiting their friend, and their car got broken into, they would have a bona fide interest in the security footage. So PG County requires you to provide the footage to those people. Elsewhere, if there's no such requirement, then it's really up to you. You don't have to do it unless and until there's a court subpoena involved. My general recommendation when it comes to law enforcement is that working with them is better than working against them. I think there will come times when I'll look at a request from law enforcement and say, this makes me a little nervous. I'm not sure about this. And I will tell them, go get a subpoena and come back, and then we will gladly help you. But 9 times out of 10, if there's an informal request for footage, hey, this incident happened on your property. Do you have any footage from that? I generally recommend cooperating with law enforcement for a lot of reasons. First of all, there's generally no reason to be adversarial at that point with law enforcement. They can be very helpful to you. If you are helpful to them, they can sometimes beef up patrols around your community if they know that there's an ongoing problem. Once you make a friend in the police department, sometimes they can be very helpful for things that might crop up that you may not foresee. If one of your residents wants to see the security, it's a little bit trickier than if law enforcement asks, because then you are sort of starting to skirt the drain of, you want to protect the privacy of all of your residents, but you also want to help this particular resident if they've had an issue, if they've been a victim of a crime, then of course you want to help them get the resolution that they need and they deserve. So it's always kind of a case-by-case basis. If you are an Offit Kurman client and you have a situation like this, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to review the situation. If you're not an Offit Kurman client, that is okay. I am sure that whoever your local counsel is more than capable. So I would recommend reaching out to them. And then if it's someone else on the property, most recently there was a dog bite in one of my properties. And the person who was bit was not a resident. She was like a friend of a resident who was on the property and got bit by a dog, and she wanted to see the camera footage. And in that instance, I actually said no, not unless and until there's a request from law enforcement, which there ultimately was, or, there's a subpoena, just because in that case, I have a little bit more concern about the privacy of other residents who may unintentionally be on that footage.
Moral of the story, it depends.
It depends. And maybe. See, next time you can just do this all yourself, Jen, because you know what I'm going to say.
No, great questions, guys. Keep them coming. I like seeing those in the chat. Let's go ahead and move on. So some of the criminal challenges, Melinda, what are we dealing with there?
Obviously there's potential for violence whenever there is some sort of car theft going on. There have been people that have been shot and killed trying to defend their property, preventing people from taking their car. Sometimes it goes very badly. 7.3% of violent crimes happen in parking garages. That's a pretty scary statistic, because that's a lot of people that are potentially at risk there. So, it's everything from just property damage all the way up to potentially loss of life can occur when you're dealing with this. There is always a potential for prosecution or liability, civil liability. So you're talking monetary judgments against you to help that person recover their damages and their injuries and make them whole again. If the situation is egregious enough, then it's possible that the state could come in and choose to prosecute the landlord for some reason or another. I personally have never seen that. I've never seen a landlord criminally prosecuted by the state of Maryland, but it's not outside the realm of possibility that it could happen. And again, it's going to come down to foreseeability. Did you know that this was happening and you just turned a blind eye to it? And then how egregious the outcome is. If somebody is murdered on your property because the gate to the parking garage has been out of commission for 3 years, I would be very worried if I were you.
Yeah. Any questions from the crowd on criminal charges or prosecution or anything like that? I am going to ask you, Melinda, just curious, what's the biggest thing that always shocks your clients when a civil parking garage case is filed against them?
That's a good question. I think probably the extent of the lawsuit. I mean, people will sue for $300,000, $500,000, because it's, I want the full value of my car. And of course, it's going to be a Tesla for $70,000 or whatever. It's never like my little Chevy that I drive that is worth $5,000. It's usually not that. It's a brand new, nice, fancy car that they're going to want the full value of the car. They could potentially ask for the difference in if their insurance rates went up because of this. They could ask for you to pay the difference. Keep in mind, this doesn't mean that that's what they're going to get in court, but that's what they're going to ask for. If they have any kind of medical bills, they could ask for that. If they have therapy because they have some kind of trauma as a result of being a victim of a crime, you could potentially be liable for that. If they have missed work because they no longer have a car and they can't get back and forth to work, if they have lost their job because they can't get back and forth to work because they don't have a car, they could ask you for that money too. And they're probably not going to be paying you rent while all of this is going on either.
It all adds up. All right. So Jane has a question. What about liability on jump/suicide from a parking garage? Sounds like they've had a couple of incidents.
So again, it goes back to foreseeability. I think by and large, someone who wants to take their own life is probably going to do it, whether you put up measures to try and stop them or not. But I think my questions would be, is there a way that you can lock them out of, wherever they're getting to jump off to? Like, let's just say, for example, they're jumping off the roof and the roof has a door that locks. I would keep that door locked to make sure that people can't go up there. But in that instance, they're probably going to find another place or another way to do it. I have never seen liability attached to a landlord because of a suicide or somebody taking their own life. I have not seen that. But again, not outside the realm of possibility. It's not, in my experience, that hasn't happened.
Thank you for that. So to take it back to car break-ins, do you recommend involving law enforcement every time, even if it's just a minor break-in?
I would at a minimum, and sometimes it's on the resident to call law enforcement and make a police report. But I think is always a good idea to document these types of incidents. If you have a police report, even better. Even if it's just an internal incident report that you put in the file, that is helpful. You just want to document everything that's going on. And if you can establish that you're trying to work with law enforcement to stop the problem, that will only help you to show that you are taking steps to be proactive to try and prevent it from happening again. Obviously, it's going to depend. Some local law enforcement departments are better than others, and they're more proactive than others. I know here in Baltimore City, they generally won't even come out if you call and tell them somebody stole my car. They will tell you, well, good luck, find it. Call us if you find it. And they will come. If you find the car, they will show up there to help facilitate you getting the car back. But by and large, they are not going to be going out driving the streets of downtown Baltimore looking for that specific car. I would still recommend just to paper the file, just to lay a paper trail there. Police reports can also help you for insurance purposes later on down the line. If you need to make a claim against your insurance, having a police report goes a long way because it establishes that there was an incident that occurred.
And so you've talked about documentation a lot. Obviously, if there is an incident report, a lot of residents are going to want to see the report. Should we let them? And are there good reasons why we should not let them?
I generally do not like to share internal incident reports with residents. Now, if it's a police report, I think it's okay to give that to them because they can usually go and get a copy of that on their own. It's public record. So it's not a harm to you or to the landlord to share what you have as far as public records. If it's an internal incident report, I would be a little bit more careful about it just because you don't know what that person is going to do with it. You don't want it to get in the wrong hands. God forbid you find out that the perpetrator of the crime is another one of your residents, then you're stuck in the middle of an issue between two of your residents, which is something that I advise against doing to the extent that you can. Never get involved in interpersonal conflicts between your residents, whether it's in the same household or it's two neighbors. Try and stay out of that as best you can, because if you pick a side, then there's no good can come of it. It's a lose-lose situation for you. But of course, the exception to that would be if you get served with a court subpoena to subpoena your records, then you have to comply. You should verify that the subpoena is accurate and it's a real subpoena that came from the court or the law or local law enforcement or the prosecutor or whatever. But in those cases, it's usually a pretty perfunctory review just to make sure that it's valid, and then you can hand it all over. And if there's any fallout from you providing the documents, it's not really your fault because you were following a subpoena.
Good stuff. All right, let's go ahead and move on. We've covered a lot about the liability, the criminal piece of it. I know a lot of you are logged in across the nation. Obviously, a lot of this varies from state to state. So, Melinda, if you could kind of break down how some of these negligences and faults differ from one another.
So this is in the realm of, we call it, the fancy name for this is tort law. But what we're talking about personal injury, right? Negligence, then there's different types of torts. I won't go into that because this is not law school and I don't want to bore you guys. But when you're talking about liability for negligence, then there are different ways that is calculated or determined based upon different states. Where I live here in Maryland, we have a pretty wacky system here. It's a pure contributory negligence. There are only a handful of states left in America that still have it. I think it's only 4. Maryland is one of the 4. What contributory negligence means is that if you contributed to the accident or to the incident in any way, if even 0.001% of it was your fault, you get nothing. You get nothing at all. Other states have what's called comparative fault or modified comparative fault. That means that they basically do a percentage game. Let's say you get into a car accident. That's the easiest example I can think of. You get into a car accident and the court, the jury or the judge determines that you were 45% at fault. Your actions contributed to the accident 45%, but the other person is 55% responsible. That means that 45% of your damages are your responsibility. You have to eat that part. But 55% is the other person's responsibility. So you would get back 55% of what your total damages were. Modified comparative fault means that the other person has to be at least 50% responsible. If they were only 49%, then you're out of luck. So the other person has to be in modified comparative fault, the other person has to be at least 50% responsible for what happened. In pure comparative fault, they don't have to be. It could be less than 50%, and you would just get that smaller chunk of whatever your total damages are. So it can be a pretty significant game changer from state to state, depending on what type of negligence laws they follow. Here in Maryland, like I said, it's very, very strict. If even the smallest, if you contributed to the accident in even the slightest way, it means you get nothing. You're getting nothing. So that can actually be helpful for landlords in cases like this. If the person parked it in the garage and it was supposed to be a secure garage, but they left their car unlocked, I think that is at least 1% responsible for their car getting stolen because they left it unlocked. So in Maryland, I think that a landlord would have a good shot of winning that just based on the contributory negligence theory alone.
And I know DC is probably its own beast, but Don popped into the Q&A. Is DC pure contributory negligence?
I don't know. To my knowledge, it is Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, and
Alabama. All right. So hopefully that answers your question, Don. So sounds like no.
Well, at least according to Google AI, because I just did it very quickly, DC does have a strict contributory negligence rule. So that would mean that if the injured party is found to have contributed in any way to the accident, they can't recover any compensation.
Thanks for clarifying. Yep. We've covered the legal liability side of it. Let's talk a little bit about how you can be proactive, how you can cover yourself moving forward. And so a lot of this is a no-brainer, you would think, but as a landlord, it's important to cover yourself. Post these throughout the parking garage. Remind your residents of things that they can do to protect themselves. And in a way, you're protecting yourself too by reminding them of these tips and tricks. So keep their car doors locked, windows closed. Don't leave their cars or their keys in the car. Don't leave it running. Don't leave it unattended if it's running. Activate your car alarm if you have one. Another thing that I learned is you can install safety devices. A lot of police departments will give out a steering wheel lock for free because this is such a big issue and they want the statistics to decline. So check with your local PD, see if that's something that they're offering. And most important, I think this is the most important one of all, remind them not to approach the perpetrator. If they see suspicious activity, report it to the management, report it to the PD, but do not approach the perpetrator.
And that actually goes for your staff too. If they see suspicious activity in the parking garage, they should call law enforcement and have law enforcement come check it out just for their own safety, because you guys are not police officers and you do not have the authority to arrest people. And, I think that the better way to go is to call your local police department, have them come out and take care of it.
Yep.
Just because we don't want any of you hurt, that causes another problem.
And so some additional things that you can do to be proactive, this is where Cloudastructure comes into play. So we talked a little bit about having cameras, adding that coverage. That right there covers you in having that coverage throughout your parking garage, throughout the rest of your community and whatnot. A lot of parking garages are dark, so you can also install motion sensor lighting to kind of help in those dark corners, those dark areas. That will also deter the transients from coming onto your property if it's well lit. And then implementing a guard service. So Melinda's brought up on-site guards. As I mentioned, they're very costly. So we have a great alternative for that. So Cloudastructure is AI surveillance, but we also offer a remote guarding solution where we have live agents in a remote center that have access to your live camera feeds and utilizing our advanced AI analytics to set up specific alerts for your community, i.e., motion in the parking garage after 10 p.m. or a person in the parking garage in a certain area during a certain time. That's going to trigger an alert to our remote guard team, a live person that's then able to bring up that clip, review it, and determine, is this normal activity? Is this suspicious activity? Is it threatening activity? And we also install speakers in those areas where our live agents are able to do a real-time intervention talk down and say, hey, you in the blue hoodie, you need to leave. You're in a monitored area. So we're giving those specific identifiers. It's not a recording. It's a live person doing that talk down. So 9 times out of 10, if someone knows they're being watched, recorded, someone knows what they look like, they're going to leave. And so that's where that proactive deterrence comes into play by utilizing technology with human intelligence. And it's way more effective than an on-site guard. They can only be in one place at one time, whereas we have eyes everywhere throughout the parking garage and whatnot. And then also doing routine health checks for your security systems. So with the Cloudastructure system, we have a comprehensive dashboard that gives the health and overall health check of all of your cameras, all of your recorders, all of your recordings in one location, your bandwidth, your network availability and whatnot. So obviously staying on top of that. We do also help monitor that for our clients as well, but you have it at your fingertips to make sure everything is running as it should. And more often than not, you don't know a camera is down until you are looking for footage on that camera. And from a proactive standpoint, the Cloudastructure system actually sends out a proactive alert saying, hey, this camera has gone down. So again, staying on top of that. And then Melinda's talked a lot about documentation, which with that comes incident reports. Anytime an incident happens on a property with our Cloudastructure remote guarding system, there's an incident report generated by our live agent that gives a ton of detail. Who was present? Where was it? What camera? What area of the property? What was happening? Who we contacted? What the outcome was, so on and so forth. And we have a lot of clients that have utilized those incident reports to actually apprehend the perpetrator by the police department. So it's super helpful to have that documentation. And that's something that we take that work off of your plate as well. Kathleen mentioned in the chat here, we have a 98% deterrence rate on crime in the parking garage. So what that means is if it gets to the point of a live talk down happening, we deter 98% of that unwanted activity from progressing any further. And I do also want to say, I'm sure a lot of you are wondering, how long does it take for the live agent to respond to an event? We're proud to say our guards respond to an analytical alert that comes through within 8 seconds or less. So again, that real-time intervention right when it's happening, which is the most important time to not miss it and to deter it from progressing. And so we have a quick video here. Sometimes I know some of you may be familiar with live monitoring or remote guarding, but it is helpful to kind of see what it looks like, hear what it sounds like, see how people respond to it. So I'm just going to play this real quick and then we'll touch on it later.
Area. You are being watched and recorded by a live agent.
I think a lot of you are well aware to where a lack of security can lead to unhappy residents, which in turn lead to vacancy costs if they decide to move out, which is one of the biggest cost factors of lack of security, I would say, is having low occupancy due to those vacancy costs. So that is our remote guardian system, our solution. And as I mentioned before, it is something that can be completely customizable based on the needs of your specific property, based on your budget as well. We know you guys operate on very stringent budgets and you might not have the budget for an on-site guard. But as I mentioned, remote guarding can in turn be more effective than an on-site guard and save you money in the long term too. So let's go ahead and dive into the Q&A here. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and pop them in. And I see Hillary also asked, if a resident has a Kia or a Hyundai and did not have that security repair made to their ignition, would they be partially responsible if their vehicle was stolen?
I think so, yes. Particularly in places with the contributory negligence doctrine like Maryland and apparently DC. And Virginia. I guess we're a little East Coast bubble of weird over here. I think that particularly since the Kia challenge has been very well publicized here in Baltimore in particular, we've had just some skyrocketing rates of vehicle thefts. In one particular neighborhood in the city, it went up by 331%. From 2023 to 2024. But if you live in the city of Baltimore, then you are, or at least should be, aware of the fact that vehicle theft is a huge problem here. And they have done a pretty good job about advertising the security repairs for Kia. I know the Baltimore City Police Department has done the steering wheel lock giveaways multiple times. They've also set up services where you can bring in your Kia and they have somebody there doing the repair for you right there. So I do think that at this point, if you live in what I would call a high-risk area and you have not taken the steps to protect yourself the way that you should, then to me, that is contributory negligence. That would be a bar to recovery in some place like Maryland. Now, in a place that has the comparative negligence, where it's a percentage game, then it's going to depend on multiple factors. But I think, yes, I think that would be negligence on the residents' part to not do what they can to try and protect themselves.
Yes, thank you for that clarification. So a few more questions that popped up. What does the Cloudastructure startup cost look like if we don't currently have cameras in our parking lot? Kirsten, I would love to, it's kind of hard to give a cost outright because every property is so different. But as I mentioned, we are able to customize our solution based on your needs, based on your budget. So Kirsten, I'd love to work with you. We can do a security audit of your property for free at no cost to you. We can gather a lot of the information virtually. We can do a quick virtual site walk, and I can get you a proposal very quickly at no cost to you. So if you're curious about what that cost looks like, please reach out to me. You'll have my email. I'll go ahead and put that up on the next slide. So I'd love to hear from you, Kirsten. How does Cloudastructure's AI surveillance actually distinguish between suspicious activity and normal resident behavior in the garage? Yes, so that's where the human factor comes in. They're bringing up those alerts. They're putting their eyes on what's happening in real time. They can pull up multiple cameras to follow someone throughout a parking garage. But that's where, again, we've previously had a conversation with the on-site staff to understand what we're looking for, how to handle certain scenarios, specifically in regards to the needs of that property. I would say more often than not, they err on the side of doing that talk down if it's needed. And we have different layers to it too. So even if it's just normal resident activity, first step is they'll make it known that they're in a monitored area. It's not going to scare the person off, but it's going to make, if it's normal activity, if it's a resident, we're going to do what we call a soft talk down just to let them know that they're in a monitored area. And then obviously determining if it's suspicious activity, if they're wearing a hoodie with a mask pulled over their head or their face, if they're carrying a crowbar. So again, that's where the human factor comes in. They're putting their eyes on it and erring on the side of being more secure than not. Do you have a partner program for guard companies and parking services? Absolutely. We love partnering with local and nationwide companies, guard companies, parking services, systems integrators, the list goes on and on. So if you're one of those on this webinar, please reach out to myself or my team, and we can definitely set up a program to partner with you. So I know we're coming up on time. I do have myself and Melinda's email up on the screen right now. I know there were probably a lot more questions that you guys have, but for the sake of time, we can take those questions and we can continue the conversation. We can have a follow-up blog. Will this camera work in a garden style community with open parking? Yes, absolutely. So we have a lot of solutions that can, extend the network. If it's a network concern that you have where you can have a wireless bridge that shoots the internet out to that camera. Obviously, we do need power in certain locations, but again, we can do a free security audit of your property if that's a question. But we have a lot of clients that utilize the Cloudastructure system in a garden style community. Yes, Henry. So any other questions that you guys have, please reach out to myself or Melinda, and then we'll have another webinar coming up. So be on the lookout for that. And again, thank you so much to the Greater Cincinnati Northern Kentucky Apartments Association for sponsoring this. And thank you, Melinda, for joining us yet again. We're very appreciative of your time and your knowledge and your advice.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for everyone that joined this webinar. I hope you found it useful. There was a lot of great insights, and we'll see you on our next webinar.